My name's Andy Holmes. I'm a professional writer and author, and I'm here to talk to you about why people aren't reading as much as they would like to. Almost every single person I know wishes they could read more books. And when I ask them why they aren't reading more books, the most common response is, I don't have the time. And here's the truth. You have the time. You're not reading more books has nothing to do with your schedule or not having enough time. Here's why I say that it has nothing to do with time. Because the average American watches 35 hours of television a week. That's almost a full-time job. So if you really wanted to read more, you could minus some TV time and read more books. Or you could just add on an hour a week or something like that to read more. Also, the average American, per the Pew Research Center, reads about 12 books a year. Now, they also think that this average is really padded, really inflated, by avid book readers, by people who read upwards of 40 books a year, and that pushes the national average up. So if you were to take out the avid readers that are reading 30, 40 books a year, your average American probably reads closer to 3 to 4 books a year. So why is this? Why are people reading only 3 to 4 books a year and watching 35 hours of TV a week and feeling like they don't have enough time to read books? If it has nothing to do with time, let's just say it doesn't have anything to do with time. They obviously have time to watch almost a full-time job worth of TV. So why aren't people reading more? So I'm a writer. I'm a professional writer. So obviously I love to read. It's something I'm very passionate about. You can always find me buried in a book. And I've come up with a theory as to why I think other people can't do this or why they aren't reading more. I think that it has to do with education. I think that when people were in middle school or high school, they were force-fed books that were, quite honestly, impossible for them to understand at that age. And it was really hard. I remember for me personally, when I was 15 or 16, all I cared about was video games, getting a girlfriend, playing sports, going to the beach, and I had an assignment to read Wuthering Heights. Okay, I don't know about you, but there's no 16-year-old boy out there that's going to have any degree of interest in a book called Wuthering Heights. I didn't care about Great Expectations. I didn't care about any of these books that I had to read when I was in high school. Not because I couldn't read, not because I couldn't understand what they were, but because I just wasn't interested. And what that did to me mentally is it made me equate reading with mental anguish or effort or just having to forcefully get through a book for an assignment to get a grade. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I think that a lot of people, now that they're older or adults, they're somewhat mentally scarred from reading all of these books at such a young age that they couldn't relate to. So now when you look at like if you find someone who's not an avid reader, right? And you try to give them a book, even a decent sized book, like something like this, right? They immediately think of trying to read To Kill a Mockingbird as an 8th grader, trying to read Lord of the Flies in the 9th grade, not understanding it, trying to read, Shakespeare or Hamlet and kind of sort of understanding what was going on, and the teacher getting angry with them or not doing well in school because they couldn't understand it or write the proper essay about it. And it's my opinion that leaves a bad taste in people's mouth about reading. So when they think about reading, they instantly go back to school and think about all these painful moments or stressful moments of having to read this stuff that just wasn't interesting. And it's funny to say that now because I actually made it a point recently to go back and read every single book. I went and reread every single book that was in my high school curriculum, like Wuthering Heights, Lord of the Flies, To Kill a Mockingbird, all these books that you're forced to read in high school. And I loved them. I absolutely loved them. They were incredible. But I remember reading them in high school and hating them and not understanding what I was reading. And I think it's just so far above the reality level of a teenager, of an adolescent, trying to get through school to read this stuff, that it actually just makes reading have a bad taste in your mouth. And I don't know why this is. I really do wish that the school system would change it. But there's no commercial books that are taught to you in high school. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't remember any books being in the top 10 New York Times bestseller list being taught to you in English literature in high school. So I think that people, when they get out of high school, I think they're glad to stop reading. They're like, oh my God, I've had to read all this stuff. I'm done. College, same thing. You get through college, you're like, okay, I had to read all this stuff I didn't want to read. I'm done reading for a while. And people just stop. That's what they do. So I'll tell you like a quick personal story about me and how I kind of broke through this. So I actually was semi-literate going into high school. I don't know if semi-literate is the right word, but I definitely was behind. I was not at the correct reading level that I needed to be at. And what happened to me in the summer between 8th and 9th grade is my dad actually gave me a copy of The Hobbit. And I read that book in between 8th grade and 9th grade. And I completely absorbed it. I loved it. It was incredible to me. And I totally fell in love with fantasy. And I read everything by Tolkien. I read all kinds of high fantasy books, and I was completely obsessed with reading really fat fantasy books. It made me feel intelligent, made me feel like I had accomplished something when I got through these things. If the book was under 600 pages, I wouldn't read it, just because I needed something to absorb my attention that I could fully commit my mind to and be entertained by. And the reason why I feel that I was able to teach myself how to read is because I actually found material that was engaging, that was exciting to me. And let's just face it, no kid in high school is going to get excited about stuff like Wuthering Heights. They're just not. You might have that like occasional guy or girl who's like a cut above intellectually that might get it, but for the most part, you don't see that. You don't have that in students. So that was what worked for me, and I just continued to read after that and absorb everything that I could. And if you want to start reading more, here's the trick. You've got to find something that actually is your reading level. If you're an adult and you haven't read a novel for like 5-10 years and you want to start reading more, you've got to find something that's easier to absorb. And this doesn't mean that you're stupid. It just means that you're kind of out of practice. It's a little bit like riding a bike, right? Like I can ride a bike, but I can't go downhill mountain biking. I can't like take a BMX bike on a half pipe and like survive. So if you want to get into reading and you haven't read for a long time, I think the key is to pick stuff that you're super interested in, that's going to hold your attention, and that's actually easier to read, something that you can rip through in like a weekend. And I know that I said that I went back and reread all these books in high school. I actually don't suggest that you do that. I suggest that you find books that are more exciting, that are written commercially to like hold the reader's attention, because it'll be much easier for you to get through because you'll want to know what happens next. Okay, so I want to leave you with a handful of book recommendations for different genres of things that'll help you get into reading. And the first recommendation I have is actually Harry Potter. It's funny that I say this because it's written for children, but it's surprisingly dark. Especially the later books are more sophisticated. And I actually think that every person on the planet should read these. Of any age, of any gender, of any race, of any belief, you should read these because they're just very magical books and they're very easy to read. And I promise you, no matter what your reading level is, whatever your age is, if you start reading these, you're going to lose sleep and you're going to be reading like, you're going to be absorbing as many pages as you can under a flashlight at night. The next book I suggest you read is The Da Vinci Code. It's got very short chapters, it's very easy to read, and it reads very, very fast. It's incredibly suspenseful. If you haven't heard of this book, you've been living under a rock. You've probably seen the movie. Even if you have seen the movie, I highly recommend that you read the book. The next thing I would recommend is honestly anything by James Patterson. The reason why I say that is because these books are really thin, and I think they're kind of like airport books. Like they're designed to be read on a plane flight, and they're incredibly thrilling and very suspenseful and very easy to read. The one I actually suggest is one of his earlier works. It's called Along Came a Spider. It introduces one of his most famous characters called Alex Cross. He's a detective, and I must have read that book in 2 evenings because I just couldn't stop reading it. It really grabs a hold of you from page 1. Another book that you should check out if you want to get into reading again is a book called Neverwhere. It's a novel by Neil Gaiman. It's a fantastic novel. It's kind of like a modern day fairy tale about this guy who finds an underground fantasy land under London. It's beautifully written and I absolutely loved it. I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan. You should definitely check that one out too. And the last book I'm actually going to suggest to you is an older book. It's by John Grisham. It's called The Firm. This was his breakout novel. You may have heard of it. They made a movie out of it with Tom Cruise and Gene Hackman. It's a fantastic novel about a young lawyer who gets, into some shady deals and has to get out of some major problems. It reads really fast. It's really simple. And it's the book that put John Grisham on the map. Now, one thing I will say about these books I just mentioned is a lot of them are older. They weren't released like this year or even in the last 5 years. And the reason why I'm suggesting these is because these are the books that kind of help me boost my literacy and boost my reading level really high and increase my passion for reading. And they're just the books that I suggest to everyone because they're great books and they're timeless. If you do decide to check them out, I put links in the description below. It does help me and help support the channel. Anyways, I hope this helps you start reading, even if you just read 10 minutes a day. And let me know in the comments below what you think of these books. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.